Welcome to interactive session with Dr. Mustafa Cenap Aydin on human fraternity, revisiting sisterhood, brotherhood as a new model for interfaith relations. Dr. Mustafa Aydin is a co-founder and the director of Istituto Tevere, a center for interreligious studies. He's also the academic coordinator at the International Institute Jacques Maritain, a center for studies on human rights, democracy, and civil society. He was born and raised in Istanbul, where he got his first degree in sociology and political science at Bogazici University, Istanbul. Since 2004, he has been living in Rome. He studied at the Pontifical Gregorian University, Vatican, in the fields of Christian theology, interfaith studies, Jewish-Christian relations, Asian religions, and law and religion at the PhD program of LUMSA University in Rome. Furthermore, he completed a master's degree in the third sector management, specializing in diversity and inclusion at the Pontifical University of St.Thomas, Vatican. Welcome you, Dr. Mustafa, and we request you to start the session. Thank you.
Thank you very much again for your very generous introduction and this very warmly welcoming me in your online session. And very warm greetings to all of you from Rome. And today I would like to share with you a very brief introduction to the idea of I just shared with you if it's really possible that we can introduce the concept of human fraternity, and especially more concretely as sisterhood and brotherhood as a topic, a theme in our interfaith relations. As you can imagine, I have already shared you some reading, and that is much more related to the documents. Sometimes it's called an Abu Dhabi document, and maybe some of you heard about this document beforehand. If not, maybe we will cover very briefly today, and maybe you had a chance also maybe to hear it from me. This is a document that I'm so much engaged with in my work and interfaith dialogue, interfaith relations. And so today our more or less, I will say, program with me, and very briefly I will introduce you this document and this importance, and then just I will discuss with you from different religious backgrounds, shall we really tackle with this idea of sisterhood and brotherhood in our interfaith relations, of course with some references which are not particularly religiously concerned. First of all, now this idea of fraternity, sisterhood, and brotherhood, I'm just saying this all the time, twice in some religious texts, it's already, you can just observe in Quranic texts and also in the Bible, in other holy texts. I'm not very much familiar with Upanishad. Maybe you can just help me, Veda. And I'm sure always there's this distinction, between the genders, sisterhood, brotherhood, in several occasions. I would like to also underline this because in our conversation today, I will make some, references to how the importance also make this distinction to enrich our discussion, not just, we will try to be politically correct and then just, be respectful. This is also part of, our activities, dialogue activities, but I would like to more focus on the importance also of this enriching distinction. Human fraternity as a concept has been introduced in February 2019 at a very high level, at global level, by two religious leaders. One is Pope Francis, the Bishop of Rome, the head of the Catholic Church. The other is Ahmed El-Tayyib, the head of the Al-Azhar University in Egypt. Maybe this is the most prestigious university in the Sunni Muslim world. Even though I put something ecumenical here, the university originally founded by Shia scholars in Egypt during the Fatimid period, but it's been evolved into a more Sunni, institution. But it's not the big deal because this is an institution which produces Islamic knowledge for everyone else. Even there are non-Muslim scholars who are going there and attend the courses to be more engaged with the Muslim world. And these two religious leaders shared with us not a beginning, actually. It is a beginning. That's why we will discuss today whether we can use this concept, based on this document as an important concept for interfaith relations. But actually, they shared with us a result also. It's a fruit of a long journey of interfaith relations. Why I'm just saying this? Because it's not happening that one day and Pope Francis and the Imam and the head of the Azhar University, Ahmed Al-Taib, came together and let's write this document and co-sign this document and then share it with the humanity. No, it's not happened like that. It is a long journey. We can just also trace back why, for instance, they opted for this date, 2019, February 2019, because that year was an important year for an important anniversary. That was the 800th anniversary of a meeting happened between two important historical figures that time. That was Saint Francis of Assisi. If you're familiar with the Catholic calendar a little bit, because this is my area of study, every day I'm just dealing with that. But today, the calendar says 6th of October. 2 days ago, 4th of October, Catholic Church celebrated the feast of Saint Francis around the world, because that was the day of his death, of the saint, the very important saint of the Catholic Church. Even though if you're not familiar with that, at least a very famous city in the United States, San Francisco, which takes its name from this saint. Even the neighboring city, Los Angeles, again, it's the Franciscan term because it's an important concept for them, the angels. So these both cities have relations with this person that I'm now telling you about. Because why Pope Francis and the Imam remembered these two persons, and their meeting happened in Damietta, a city in Egypt, because that was 800 years ago, 1219. That was not a nice period of time. Now we are also not directly, but just are indirectly. We had a very influence on that. We are living a moment of war and conflict. And that time there was a huge conflict between two parts of the world. That was, we call today the Crusades. And Crusades were happening that time. Some Christian states, nations of that time decided to march towards that we call today Holy Land, Israel, Palestine. And during this period, there was a sultan called Malik King in Arabic, Al-Kamil, who was the nephew of Salah ad-Din Ayyubi, and who was situated in Damietta in Egypt. And he had a guest, very strange guest. He was a monk, and that's important for us for topic today. The monks among themselves, they call themselves friars. Friar is a term for brother, coming from Latin. So a brother, Brother Francis, Friar Francis, would like to pay a visit to him during this period of conflict, because from his part, there was an army over there combating, against the Muslim part. And then he would like to visit this sultan, and he would like to find a brotherly way for reconciliation, not just with sword, not with arms and conflicts, hating each other, He would like to give a message. He wanted to try. It was a very humble. He was not San Francis. We now call him San Francisco. He was such a simple guy, just someone wanted to dedicate his life to God. Very simple. He had a very rich family, merchant family. He rejected all his goods. He was supposed to inherit a good shop in the city center of Assisi. He didn't want to get the stuff, but just he joined this army, but without his weapons, and he would like to visit the Sultan. And he visited Sultan. And the part of this is his actually the brave act as a man of faith. But the Sultan was very open to this visit. He didn't hesitate to welcome this friar, this brother. And he saw in him a brother, is a part of, now I'm just trying to conceptualize this meeting, but they were brothers, but maybe they were not aware of it, Just here, I would like to introduce, for instance, one of the, maybe I can just say, I'm not very sure whether Al-Kamil was aware of the important saying of Ali bin Abu Talib, the cousin and son-in-law of Prophet Muhammad. And he says, people are two types. They are either your brothers in faith or your equals in humanity. And this idea of brotherhood, not just, being in the same faith community, but being in the human family, is not particular to Islam, to Christianity, to Hinduism, to Buddhism, different religions, of course, embrace this idea. But of course, sometimes we are not so much open to go back to our relevant scriptures and traditions to, highlight this idea of being part of a human family. Here, I think something really, worked well, and that meeting happened. And 2019, Pope Francis wanted to celebrate this anniversary, 800th anniversary of this important meeting, visiting to Muslim countries. But, if you had the chance to read the document inspired by a long history, long journey of Muslim-Christian dialogue, but its intention is to embrace the whole humanity. It's not just, aiming to stay with the dichotomy of Muslim-Christian dialogue, relations, or whatsoever, what you want to call. This is the 800th thing. But beyond that, more particularly the last century, from the both parts, from the Catholic Church and the Azhar University, there have been lots of meetings happened between academics, spiritual people, religious people, lay people. They just change so many ideas during the academic meetings, informal meetings, through friendships. Here I would like to, remember a person which has been very important, not only for this dialogue, for this document, but also in general for the whole idea of interfaith dialogue for the 20th century, because he was a scholar of Islam, but he was so much open to dialogue with different religious traditions when he was teaching in Paris, Islamic studies. That person is Louis Massignon. Louis Massignon, who is a French scholar. And this year, we particularly remember him. Why do we remember Louis Massignon? Because Louis Massignon today is remembered for two things. First, this year is his 60th anniversary, just departing from this world. He died in 1962, so 6 years ago. Another thing is very interesting, because in 1922, 1 century ago, he defended his PhD thesis. Okay, so many people defended the PhD thesis. Should we really celebrate every PhD thesis when they arrive to 100th anniversary? Of course not. because that was a very particular PhD thesis. He defended his thesis on Al-Hallaj, the Muslim mystic. Al-Hallaj, who actually lived more than 1,000 years ago. Here we don't have time to deal with Al-Hallaj, but there is a huge interest from a Catholic scholar who would like to study a Sufi in the Islamic tradition, which has so many connotations for Muslim Christian dialogue at the time. And in order to understand better Hallaj and Sufism, Louis Massignon, with his colleagues at Collège de France, Sorbonne University, he has so much engaged with other religions. Of course, in order to understand Sufism, he did so much work on Hinduism and Buddhism in order to understand how does it, the ascetic life of this Asiatic religions, especially these religions coming from India, had their impact, the huge impact on the mystical life of Muslim religious orders. And so he just offered us an idea of how shall we understand, the transcendental human spirituality, so that we could really develop an idea of sisterhood and brotherhood when we engage with people of different religious backgrounds. And Massignon was so much inspired by another important person, and he was actually canonized this year. Canonization, I make a small parenthesis for you. It is a Catholic term. You can just, understand with the idea of sainthood. When Catholic Church would like to elevate someone to the level of sainthood, holiness, there's a whole process, and there's a sort of a ministry, a global ministry to oversee, the whole life of this person and this whole procedures. And this year, last May, Catholic Church elevated to the level of sainthood a friend of Louis Massignon, another French guy, whose name was Charles de Foucauld. Charles de Foucauld lived for many years with Muslims in the Algerian desert, and he over there experienced a mysticism, Christian mysticism, which is inspired by the religious life of Muslim nomads, Tuareg. And what he left to us today, not just some writings, interesting life, a mystic life, coming from a very secular background. He was atheist, and then he was reconverted to his faith. He became a very spiritual Catholic. But he left us not only what I'm just saying to you, but he left us so many people around the world, because still his spirituality is represented by two groups of people. Little sisters of Jesus and little brothers of Jesus. And these people have this spirituality to live brotherhood and sisterhood according to their faith, especially living with people who have difficulties, who have been marginalized, and especially for this order, since their founder, Charles de Foucauld, wanted to live, just live, to give witness of their faith. It's not preaching, proselytism, mission, just living with them, since he opted to live with Muslims, and the followers of him, the little sisters and little brothers, always wanted to live in a Muslim context, but also in other contexts too. Not necessarily, but I'm just giving you an example because very recently I paid a visit to their center here in Rome, and I met this little sister, a nun, originating from Slovakia. Remember, there was a country called Czechoslovakia and split it. She's part of the Bratislava, not the Prague. And she was explaining to a group of people her vocation, her life story. And all of a sudden she said, okay, I was praying, she said. I was praying to live in a Muslim country because that was what Charles de Foucault did. I would like to understand what he really felt, how he became more Catholic, more spiritual in his faith, living with another spirituality, another religion. And then her prayers were responded because one of her superiors said, okay, we would like to send someone to Turkey. So she was sent to Turkey many years ago. And that's why in this conversation, she explained to this group of people her experiences as a Catholic nun, Catholic little sister with Muslim people in Turkey. Okay, now I'm coming back to this again, the idea of document, because I shared these names very quickly. Louis Massignon, Charles de Foucault, I called them the hidden architects of this document. Because 1962, Pope Francis and also Imam al-Tayyib, they were very young. They had no idea maybe of these people, but they prepared, because especially Massignon and so many other people from the Catholic Church, they had this friendship with professors and imams from LUMSA University, and they paved actually the idea of how can they just, work together to offer something. Attention is very important, not something for reinforced Muslim-Christian dialogue. This dialogue between them would like to, propose something for the whole humanity. And if you had the chance to read the document would like to embrace everyone around the world. It's not just a proposal to enforce Muslim-Christian dialogue, Muslim-Christian understanding. And it's an area, I don't deny that. There's so many issues that Muslims, Christians, because if you look at the types of interreligious dialogue, we have different types of it. And one of them is we just, also focus on experience of this bilateral dialogues. There are issues that Jews and Christians were discussing among each other. That's called Jewish-Christian dialogue. There's a Muslim-Hindu dialogue. There's a Buddhist-Christian dialogue. They are all valid and very interesting because this is the specific areas in which you can also raise not only many questions which are pertinent for both religions, but also you can also develop a different view of dialogue within this deeply, profoundly discussed bilaterally between two religions. But in this case, this document would like to embrace the humanity. Another person I would like to add here, Pope Paul VI. Paul VI, why he's important? He's the Pope between 1963 and 1978. He is the Pope who signed many documents of the Second Vatican Council. One of them is Nostra Aetate, and which makes references to Judaism, Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism as world religions with which Catholic Church should engage in a conversation, in dialogue. In 1964, Paul VI, the Pope Paul VI, in the second year of his papacy, he published an important encyclical. We call it encyclical, like a booklet in which the popes explain their view about how would like today, their will to engage with the world and with the church. In this document, Ecclesiam Suam, it's in Latin, meaning his church or his community, he used the term human fraternity. That's important. Why he used this term? Because he had a very deep friendship. Maybe you remember at the introduction, Pragya made a mention to an institution I'm working with. I'm the Vice Secretary General. That's the Jacques Maritain Institute. Because Paul VI had a very deep friendship, brotherhood with Jacques Maritain. Today, maybe you will be, you can just make this question, why we are so much, looking at French intellectual world, but, we should really recognize the richness of the French intellectual discussion of 20th century, which really contributed too much what we are talking about today. Jacques Maritain, French philosopher of the 20th century, and also lived in Rome in a very important period, just after the war, Second World War, between 1945 1948, as a French ambassador to the Vatican. He had a very good relationship, brotherhood, with the Pope Paul VI much before he became Pope. So why I'm telling you this very idea of seeing the humanity as part of, as yourself, as your existence, and seeing this relationship between brotherhood and sisterhood, the philosophical argumentation of that so much developed by Jacques Maritain, and he described the human persons around him, because we consider him as a philosopher of the personalism, and he considered every human person as, I will just make it a very colloquial language, as a travel body. This is a journey, the human journey, that what we are actually doing as our life is a journey. We know more or less when we started, even though we were not aware when we started. Someone had to tell us that we came to this world and we are part of this journey. But then we don't know actually when the journey ends, but then focusing on the journey, on the very existence of journey, we have so many bodies around. We have this companionship. This is the language that he is using also in French. I'm just translating the more accurate, version of this from French. The companionship. It's not the companionship that the political ideologies. That's we find around us, and that these people are brothers and sisters that we are in dialogue. They actually teach us what they are teaching us, our very existence as a human person. And around us, we have this constantly changing and developing mirrors. Whenever we feel ourselves maybe a little bit lost, or the basic philosophical questions, who are we and where we are coming from, where are we going? And then just we are looking at these people around us, our sisters and brothers, and they actually help us with their humanness, with their humanity, with their being as human person as we are. They are actually telling us some answers, or the ways in which that we can answer these questions, or at least we become aware that they are posing the same questions at the very moment that we are dealing with these questions. So Jacques Maritain is an important person to understand. Here, I'm just trying to now a little bit more going on to the religious terms, meaning that when the Human Fraternity documents emerged, there had been so many positive, answers to that around the world, even at the very international level. Maybe 4th of February now is celebrated as International Human Fraternity Day by the United Nations. So this is, as the United Nations just accepted that, inspired by the document that we already covered with its genesis, not the whole details, because I left it to you as a reading. But the thing is, importantly, since we are dealing with the concept of sister brotherhood as a concept of interfaith dialogue, we should really understand the responses of different faith groups. Okay, the thing is, if you look at the sacred scriptures, especially sacred scriptures of these two religious leaders, Bible and Quran, you can see, if you take the term brother and sister as a merely biological term, you could have serious problems, because Bible and Quran don't give you always the best examples of brotherhood and sisterhood. Starting with the children of Adam, Cain and Abel. You see the first murder around the world, according to this narrative, biblical and Quranic narrative, happened between two brothers. One brother killed his own brother. So the first human murder started between brothers. Oh my God, that's really frightening. Just then we are asking people to see each other as brothers. And then if you just make the long list, the brothers of Joseph, the sons of Jacob, and so on and so forth. I can give you many other examples, which can maybe, not very convincing to use this term brother and sisterhood to raise more compassion, understanding among human beings. But here, the important thing is to understand when we talk about this fraternity, brotherhood and sisterhood, it's not something given. Actually, this vision of fraternity, brotherhood and sisterhood, involves an idea of an effort to construct actually brotherhood and sisterhood. It's not just something given automatically. But we can find, a basic, at the base for this in the traditions. I know that, for instance, I already quoted Ali bin Abu Talib. He was saying, brothers in faith, but also brothers equals in humanity. So this is a religious vision which invites you to make this effort. It's not just a given. Okay, you have some people around. First of all, even if you just during faith, you should really discover this part. Sometimes also in a general way, I can just quote a Quranic verse, for instance, from the chapter 49, verse 10. And that says, the believers are but brothers. So make peace, settlements between your brothers. And fear God that you may receive mercy. Okay, some exegesis of Quran, they say, okay, this is, brothers, and then the faith, referring to Muslims. But, here, an idea of brotherhood, which is not biological. This is the model that I would like to share with you. Because when we talk about these visions of brotherhood, which is not through biological bonds, it requires, whether it could be within the religious community or the vision of Ali, it's a humanity, it is an invitation to make an effort to see the other human person as a brother, not something automatic. Again, another thing from Gospels, you remember you can find in 3 synoptic Gospels, Gospel according to Mark, Luke, and Matthew, but I will quote only the Mark here, according to also the historical account, the oldest one. Chapter 3, the verses between 31 and 35. And Jesus is actually had this dialogue. Jesus Christ had this dialogue with people around him. And a crowd was sitting around him. And they said to him, your mother and your brothers are outside seeking you. And he answered to them, Jesus answering, who are my mother and my brothers? And looking about at those who sat around him, he said, not the people waiting for him, but people around him, showing them, here are my brothers and my mother and my brothers. For whoever does the will of God, he is my brother and sister and mother, he replied. Okay, this is, you can see, I'm not just, for both examples of Quranic and this version, you can just also respond saying, oh, just that, okay, the brothers, Christians and Muslims. Yeah, you can just make this conclusion very rapidly. But here I'm just trying to show you an idea of developing either brother and sisterhood with your intellectual, spiritual effort. It's not just, that you should take the person in front of you, just, okay, are we related, are religious, for maybe believers, okay, we're coming from Adam and Eve or whatever, just biological bonds around. No, this is not about the biological bonds, or you're just looking at the person, human person. Okay, he has the nose on the same place, so we should have more or less, if you like the animals, they have more or less, similarity. So we should be related in a way, they have nose here, but not here. So, okay. But the thing is, it's not just, looking for and trying to catch these biological similarities. It is the will. It is actually the interest to develop this fraternal bonds between human beings. And again, and now just departing from this idea, I will give some concrete examples which were formerly, restricted to some religious maybe areas of life, but now they are more open. When I was talking about Saint Francis, I said he was a brother, friar, because he became also founder of a fraternity. We call them as Franciscans, for instance. In different religious communities, there are people that we call them as mystics, monks, brothers, sisters. They live together, and their living together is usually based on idea of mutual understanding. They come different ethnic backgrounds, social, cultural, different social, cultural groups and classes. But they come together and they just would like to share something, They would like to share a life. They just, worship, the same values, etc., etc. This motherhood, this model, being a sister and brother, and the relations are based on sisterhood, brotherhood. Now, just in this proposal of human fraternity, could be applied in interfaith relations independently from a personal choice to become a nun, friar, monk, Sufi, etc. Why? Because, this in our world of today, interfaith relations are so, spontaneous, sometimes virtual, sometimes real life. But, we are so much open to engage with interfaith relations through this idea of how can I relate myself to someone that I don't know very well, but that I know that his or her Weltanschauung, the worldview, is related to mine, just because he or she also would like to develop an idea of mutual understanding while recognizing the differences, focusing on similarities, starting with a very simple fact that we are part of a human family. And this human family is not just, again, I'm just saying this and just to conclude, it's not based on our biological similarities that we have, we don't deny that, but also it is beyond that. Because it's why it should be beyond that, because here we actually put a real effort to our reason, to our heart, through our knowledge, through experience, study, etc., that we would like to really see the other person, the other human person, as our brother and sister. It is not something that we have given automatically. There are so many obstacles to embrace this idea, but we are called actually to make this effort, and so that we can relate ourselves to people of different faiths through this idea of brotherhood and sisterhood. I'm done here as my exposition, so I would love to be engaged with a real, interactive engagement and dialogue with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mustafa. Anyone who wants to ask anything, any questions, or have a comment, please raise your hands and feel free to participate and have a good discussion.
Did I say that James raised his hand, or it was a mistake? James Tunglut. Okay, what is a mistake? I don't know. Okay, now
Kulsum. Yes, Kulsum. Go ahead.
Thank you so much for spending your time with us. We really like this session. I really like that one quote that you said that I think it was you said by the Caliph Ali, that either your person is either your brother in faith or your equal in humanity. That was, I think, the quote. And I just wanted you to clarify that bit about the Louis Massignon, because I kind of missed that, like the significance of his contribution to the idea of fraternity.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So,
do I respond immediately, or are we supposed to collect many questions? I'm asking a logistical question that I don't want to.
You can answer one by one.
Okay, thank you.
If there are too many questions in the end, we will take together.
Okay. Kulsum Han, thank you very much for your question and for your participation. Louis Massignon, yes, I a little bit kind of skipped that because I have to put them, three of them, even Paul VI, but maybe Massignon, Charles de Foucault, and Maritain together. And especially if you can read French, last year they published the correspondence, the letters exchanged, so many letters between Massignon and Maritain. Because Maritain, as a philosopher, he would like to learn more about religions, especially about Islam and Hinduism. And he was asking so many questions to this expert of religions, Louis Massignon. Massignon, through his experience in the Muslim world, because he had a very interesting life. Beforehand, he was a soldier, French soldier. Then he became more Catholic. At that time, also, he was agnostic. Massignon, studying the Muslim Sufi orders, engaging with them, he discovered that idea of being brother among themselves. And then when he turned back to his faith, he understood that is also very important, central in his faith. And for his case, or for Maritain, both of them followed the footsteps of Charles de Foucault. Charles de Foucault, leaving this heritage as like being, because the term that he used, I skipped that. I don't want to just go too much in details. Thank you very much again for this question, because it really helps me to some stuff that I'm now seeing, on my notebook. Charles de Foucault called himself as universal brother. He would like to be brother of everyone else around him, starting with the Tuareg, Muslim Tuareg in Algeria. And this idea of working on himself, making himself as the brother, transforming himself while staying as a deeply rooted Christian, but transforming himself as a universal brother of everyone else around the world, picked up by Massignon and Maritain, even in their lives. For instance, Maritain, after the death of his wife Raisa, he personally became a little brother of Jesus. He became a monk after his wife passed away. He didn't want to remarry or just to stay as a layperson. He made this. For the case of Massignon, there's something very important, because Massignon would like to actually transform this brotherhood into more concrete level. He started important prayer moments between Muslims and Christians to create this brotherhood. They called Badaliye. That's started in Cairo in 1930s and finished in 1962 with his death. And in his years, he would like to put together Christian Muslims praying together, creating this brotherhood and sisterhood among themselves, especially for very delicate moments, even very delicate political moments, because he was asking Christians to pray and work for the Muslim minorities in the Christian world, and asking Muslims to pray and help for the Christian minorities in the Muslim world. I mean, the Muslim minorities in Christian world, Muslim, the vice versa. And just good news about that, after his death, the Badalia kind of just diminished and forgotten. But recently I discovered a group, and this group started 20 years ago, but I had no idea. Dorothy Buck, she's a PhD. She did her thesis on Louis Massignon in Boston. She started a new Badalia group in Boston. And for the last 20 years, they joined together. Now Muslim Christians, but it's open to everyone else. They do this special prayer to enforce their brother and sisterhood. And actually, I started participating in this group online, of course. I could not just get there for a monthly meeting. And I was really amazed. And this is, again, thanks to Massignon. Last but not the least, Massignon, as a scholar of Hallaj, the Sufi thinker, maybe you remember him because he had this, the phrase which created so much disruption that time. He said, Al-Haq. And they said, well, whether he said, I'm the truth or I'm God, just all in moment of ecstasy. That, Hallaj, Massignon studying Hallaj and actually focus on more an idea of being a brother, not all of the humanity, but the whole universe and nature. And that's just, another idea that we can learn from the work of Louis Massignon.
Very interesting. Thank you. I'll be looking up more of this.
Thank you.
Anyone else wants to go? And it doesn't have to be a question. It
Yes.
can be a comment. Yes.
Sir, it has been seen that there have been many such efforts in the past to spread the message of brotherhood and the peace, but it was not received as it should have been. But the current effort in the name of fraternity, like especially we can see the West is welcome this like much. So I want to know what is the reason behind it. Like even the Muslim clerics and the Muslim kings in the past, they try to attempt this kind of effort, but now like Western media and the thinkers and philosophers, like they welcome like by-heartedly, but in past we haven't seen like that certain. So what is the reason behind
it? Thank you, Mohammed, for your question. This just be a little bit look at the geopolitical context of 20th century very rapidly. As the Nostra Aetate document, this is a document, it's a document of the Catholic Church, but this is very important for all religions because this is the only religion, I will say, made an official declaration about the interreligious dialogue. There are interreligious dialogue in 20th century. Other religions are open to dialogue, but they didn't, really publish a document which could be, enlightening for all their faithful. Turning back Nostra Aetate number 3, one, it talks about the relations between Christians and Muslims it doesn't deny this past. It says, even though the second paragraph of number 3, you can find it easily online and the website of the Vatican. It says, even though there had been so many conflicts and I'm trying to translate the better way. Let's put it conflicts and quarrels, etc., etc. And it says this council invites both parts, in this case, Muslim Christians, to forget the past. It's a bit difficult task because the recent past, I would say the last, because for the humanity, we say recent would be some centuries, some two, 3 centuries. It had not been the best version of the peaceful coexistence. We know that very well. The change, I will say, is a result of the tragic events of the last 2 world wars, I would say, because all those efforts of dialogue actually started seeing this idea of brother sister much more. It existed even also like a parenthesis, a constitutional level. Just remember, at the end of the 18th century, in the US and in France, when the republics were born, actually, one of the ideas was fraternity, brotherhood. Just how to put together the citizens as brothers. And I didn't really because when we pick up the concept of brotherhood, fraternity, we can, find so many definitions and political concept, sociological concept, etc. I just try to focus on the religious aspect. But the idea of brother, even by the socialists, for instance, the socialism always offered an idea that workers and people, in the labor area, who earn their daily income, working daily, and just using the material, touching the materials, and they are in a way brothers and sisters. We have different ideas of brother sisterhood, but for our case, this 2 tragic moments of this world wars, and pushed especially the thinkers, and visionaries, and leaders of the Western world to find, I will say, that was the Immanuel Kant's dream, in a way, a perpetual peace. For instance, European Union, we usually look at the economic part, and usually they teach, that was the economic interest. It's not really true. The whole idea of European Union, if you look at this, the founding fathers of European Union, they were all really very religiously engaged spiritual people. And they would like to really develop an idea of brotherhood, at least in Europe. And let me give an example of how this human tragedy transformed into something more tangible, just to rediscover the brotherhood, to create a reconciliation. The Nostra Aetate documents of the Catholic Church, or so many other interfaith engagements in the post-war Western world in Europe, are so much related with the tragedy of Shoah, the Holocaust, that the totalitarian regime of the 20th century wanted to eliminate the whole Jewish people here in Europe. This idea actually, when the World War finished, and then the partners of this, interfaith engagement, and they also started making interrogation, especially Catholic Church, whether they had been really critical and resistant against this human tragedy. And that idea of Nostra Aetate just started with a reconciliation with the Jewish people. But why I'm just telling this example? Because when first of all, Pope John XXIII, the Pope between 1958 and 1963, just 5 years. He was kind of oldish Pope, but he started the Second Vatican Council, and he had the vision of writing documents about interfaith engagement. When he received, after all this human tragedy and people who claim to be Christians killing, exterminating the Jewish people, etc., when he received the first group of Jewish people here in Rome, in Vatican, he addressed them with a biblical verse, and which can be found in Quran in a similar way. He used the language of Joseph, the son of Jacob, when he met first time his brothers in Egypt, because his brothers could not recognize him. He was so much changed, become minister, etc. And he said, "I'm Joseph, your brother." Pope John 23rd received these people with this verse. He said, "I'm Joseph, your brother." I mean, he attempted to reconcile with Jewish people through idea of brotherhood. And a brotherhood which is based on reconciliation. So I think why it's become so relevant, this is my personal interpretation, because the geopolitical context of 20th century urged leaders to find ways in which we don't really, because, the calculations of economy, political calculations, and the balance of power, etc., they really failed. And they wanted to understand how can actually relate people to peaceful coexistence and reconciliation. And I think that was one of the ideas. Not everyone else, as you have already observed, still not everyone else is embracing this idea, but it's becoming more and more relevant at the moment.
Muhammad Osama, you can go next.
But I think Osama's microphone is off, I guess.
First of all, thank you, sir, for this. I have two questions basically. How is your experience working with the Jewish people? Are they really open to dialogue? Are they really interested in fraternity, brotherhood? And if they are, as my previous question, as the earlier question was that the world is open to dialogue or accepting, the US is accepting to come and have a discussion, debate. But I can feel that Jewish people are they really interested in any kind of dialogue? Are they really trying to diminish, or are they believe they are superior, or are they really interested in dialogue? My question is that, and how is your experience working with them?
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Osama, for your question. Jewish people, from the very beginning, have been always very active in that. Today we call it dialogue because it's a new language of 20th century. We can just call it like meeting among different religious people, or we can call it also conversation, whatsoever we can just. And why I'm just telling you, because Jewish people since 70 AD, and this is second destruction of their temple in Jerusalem by Roman Empire, they have been living in diaspora situation. So everywhere around the world is minority. Between 70 and 1948, the foundation of Israel. So the first time in the history, again, after 2,000 years, Jewish people started living in a way that they can also feel themselves a majority in a country. Since they have been always still they are as a religious minority, they are kind of so much, engaged in conversation with other religions, but especially in the 20th century after the Shoah, even though that was very tragic for them, they also try to find a way to dialogue. But let me explain. In my experience, in my observation, I'm very fortunate to know and be in dialogue with the oldest Jewish community in Europe, the Roman community. It started 2,200 years ago. Before Christians came here, Jewish people came here. Still they are here. They have a neighborhood, some neighborhoods here in Rome. But let me explain. It's a sociological requirement for us, also for interfaith studies. We should actually avoid all the time the generalizations. If I say Jewish people, you open the box, so many differences. You can find the differences between Ashkenazi, the Northern European, and the Sepharad Jewish people, meaning that Sepharad, Southern European, and Northern African, and they have different approaches with their language, Yiddish or Ladino, or in every different nation, in every different nation state, they had a different experience. If they are in minority within a Muslim society, in a Christian society, so on and so forth. There are the Jewish people who are totally secularized, or for their religious perspectives. They're Orthodox, ultra-Orthodox, conservatives, progressive, reform. So for every community, I can just tell you different stories about that. But make it very short. My experience, because I work with Jewish people for different occasions, I'm part of the Religions for Peace Italy, so in the board of governors at the national level, I work closely with Jewish people, Jewish friends, and they are coming from different backgrounds, as I mentioned to you. They are very open to interfaith dialogue. They would like, even not only for interfaith dialogue, for instance, I'm just telling you a case, very interesting case. There is a huge problem about Muslim communities in Western China, Uyghur Muslims. And in the interfaith engagement, Jewish people have been always the first ones to defend the rights of the Muslim communities persecuted in China. I find it very courageous because, there are so many countries, even Muslim countries, who cannot pronounce anything about that because they have so many economic engagements with China. They totally avoid talking about this problem. But in my experience here, the Jewish organizations have been not only engaged with interfaith dialogue, but also for this interfaith advocacy, defending the rights of a different religious minority elsewhere. In this case, because, at the international level, since there is a problem, a huge problem in the Middle East between Israel and Palestine, most of the time, Muslims and Jewish people could not find very easy to engage interfaith dialogue. I can understand that. It's a very valid and understandable point of view, but we should really understand that Jews and Muslims have been living everywhere else, around the world.
Sir,
And also,
sir, they can raise the voice for Uyghur Muslim, but why they are not ready to
Usama, can you
accept the
fix
voice?
your camera, please? We can't see your face.
Sir, they are ready to open. Sir, they are raising the voice for the Uyghur Muslims, but they are not raising the voice for the. They are not even trying to let the Palestinians live peacefully. They are not open for dialogue. They're just doing what they believe they are doing. They are just trying to impose, just trying to conquer their places, and the world is not saying anything. So I have this question about if they are open for dialogue, then they should be open for the dialogue for the Masjid Aqsa as well. It should not be like that. You can raise a voice for the Uyghur Muslim, but when it comes to Masjid Aqsa, you can do anything you want. It should not be like that, sir.
No, actually, the problem is also recognized by many Jewish people in Europe and the US. I know so many Jewish organizations. They openly criticize the injustices committed by the government of Israel, etc. And I've been personally to Jerusalem, actually. And my experience was quite different, very interesting, because my view is like that. People, if you meet people, Christian, Jewish, and Muslim, who have been living there for many centuries. People, doctor, lawyer, teacher, cleaner, whatever, they are really willing to live together and they don't have particular problems. Unfortunately, both sides are so much manipulated by international political powers. Because I visited Christian families, Jewish families, Muslim families, and I met so many Muslims, who are, maybe, are you aware of that? 20% of the Israeli population are Muslim. They are not living in Palestine. They live in Israel. They have the Israeli passport. And they live in Israel. They enjoy being a citizen of Israel. And the things are very complicated. But the problem is over there. As a Muslim, I've been to Masjid al-Aqsa several times. No one just stopped me. And I enjoyed, all the prayers from very early prayer, Fajr, and up to night prayer. I really enjoyed myself being over there. But of course, the tension is over there. It is a problem. But here, concerning the interfaith dialogue, I should make this necessary distinction. That's a problem over there. But for instance, myself, I live as a Muslim, as an Italian Muslim. I live here in Rome. And I live not only with Jewish people, I live with everyone else. In my neighborhood, there are 5 mosques, usually of Asian backgrounds, Bangladesh, etc. There are 3 Hindu temples, 1 Baha'i center, several Pentecostal churches, and so on and so forth, Buddhist centers, etc. With these people, I live in a city, and I'm concerned. I'm not forgetting about the problems around the world, but first of all, in order to give a good example, we live and work here. And whenever, for instance, Ramadan arrives, we have an absolutely not avoidable appointment with Jewish people. We break iftar together. And they come, the places, we prepare food for them, we invite their catering services, and we would like to really show something even to our friends and our brothers and sisters over there in Israel, Palestine. We could really do together, It's just, we are not in a hostage situation of this tragic political conflict, but we would at least, in our minimum, because we don't have the power, we are not a state, at least we say, as Muslims, Jews and Christians, Buddhists and Hindus, also we did also several Hindu-Muslim iftar dinners here, we say we can eat together, we can work together, we can make some charity together, and maybe you can also try this, and you can give a chance to peace. This is what we do in interfaith engagement. But of course, we do constantly prayers together here, involving all these religions to resolve the problem. But in my opinion, the problem of the Middle Eastern problem is a problem which can only be resolved if the international powers are totally, engaging with that. First of all, also the Muslim countries. If the Muslim majority countries also, they really, engage with, because don't forget about it. If you look at the map, there's Israel, there's Palestine, and the whole region is dominated by Muslim countries. So the main responsibility, in my opinion, is not Israel's or other countries, these people around the Muslim, because the region should be a peaceful region. Sorry.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
But
I know
this
what I would like to say, because I say just in our cities, communities, if we can just give a good example, this is I think our responsibility. We can make maybe a one drop into the pool of peace. But of course, questions which are so complicated, and I assure you, I know so many Jewish organizations in Europe, in the US, they are totally critical of the injustices committed in Palestine.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Imran, you can go next.
Good afternoon. Hello, sir. Sir, I see that you have theology as your background. So my question is very precise, and it's something which, like the question is like I know something about it, but I want to know more about it. From a since you have done theology, so I wanted to know text, what does the word of God, like simply the word of God, what does the text speak about identity of humanity, of human beings, not as a Christian, not as a Muslim, or not as a Jew? What does the text of God say from the Torah to Bible to Quran say on identity per se, identity of us as human beings? When it comes to Quran, I have read that the text say that Allah says that I have created you all from one single soul or one single seed. So is there similar notions? No, it's not a notion; it's a word of God. So is there similar things which God has spoken in the Torah or the Bible? I want to know that. Not as a Muslim, not as a Christian, not as a Jew, but to humanity. When how does God speak to humanity first? Thank you.
Thank you, Imran Ahmed, for your question. It's I think, a very basic approach that we should take when we engage with interfaith dialogue. Here, the biblical, the Quranic version. Okay, let's go back a little bit. Also, the book, that booklet, encyclical letter that I mentioned of Paul VI, Ecclesiam Suam, because it is a book which actually defines what does it really mean, dialogue. Or he used the term, dialogue is a term coming from Greek language, but he wrote this book in original Latin. In Latin, the term is colloquium. It is just, being in conversation with. And the whole idea of dialogue starts with the will, the desire of God to talk to us. That's very important, because here, human beings are created and they got this, we call this revelation, because it's just divine message. And, don't just, if you focus on dialogue, as in dialogue, we have two partners at least, and God communicates. And when God communicates, there is his wish to be heard, to be understood, to be perceived by someone over there. And this is the whole idea of this Quranic and biblical, understanding. But concerning what is the essence of human being from God's perspective, here, for instance, sometimes Muslims say, okay, the Christians, Jews do have this, but actually also Muslims do have, but through a hadith. There's a Latin term, imago Dei, because in a biblical version, God presents his creation of human person as a creation of in his image. God created human person in his image. Sometimes it frightens Muslims, because something about image, then in Christianity, then Jesus is over there and there's a, face of God. And that just, people say, oh, okay, no, it shouldn't be an idea of Islamic view of that. But interestingly enough, there's a hadith about that, because the hadith says, Rahman, the merciful, God the merciful, created Adam, the human person, in his own image. There's a hadith about that. That doesn't mean, of course, because this is an important theological effect. Even the Christian Jews also don't mean that God created the human being in his physical image. Although they do also accept that we cannot really conceive God with our understanding, our physical understanding. But here, there's this connection between God and human being through, we can just call it ruh. That's, how the God's spirit actually shared through his will, through his desire with the human person. And that's why here, when we talk about, how this, the revelations, God's revelations, in this context about the Abrahamic faiths, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, here the idea of human person, which was created by God, as a mirror to reflect Asma-i Husna, his most beautiful names. Sometimes we call them 99, we count 99, sometimes we say 1,000. There are several different, understandings of that. But in this case, of course, the very idea of engagement between God and human person is focusing on, again, I'm just, concluding with that the desire, will of God to be known, and he would like to hear from human person this recognition. And that's why in the Sufi tradition, there is this narrative about the creation of the all human spirits, and in which they respond the question raised by God. And God asks, am I not your Lord? And they say, yes, you are our Lord. This is because this is, and how does the human person pronounce this recognition of the gods? Because he could not do that if God would not have created this capacity of human person. And this is much more the question of kalam. It's a big question, but I just try to a little bit, make it short.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Akanksha, you had put up your hand. Do you want to go next?
Okay, yes. It's not a question, but just some clarification of languages, like this document I was reading. And still, I'm wondering, like, they're using in the name of God. Like, as we know, there are so many religions. Like, I belong to India, and we have a rich culture of this Buddhism, Jainism. Those who don't believe in particular God, or the term God, the terminology God. So they believe some kind of energy or source that could be something else. But the terminology, like, I just want some clarification on this. And in the first line, they said, like, being equal out of his mercy, his in capital. So I just found these things, the questionable and not acceptable as a universal thing we are talking about. Some gender biasness, or still when we try to reinterpreting the things, when we try to reinterpreting the theological things, still we are not very far from this gender biasness and all. So those were the questions emerging in my mind. If you can give us quick clarification on that, like the language clarification.
Akanksha, thank you very much really for your questions. I find them very inspiring, and I assure you that this document also immediately criticized by Muslim and Christian women, because the name of the human fraternity was the sisterhood. And still, I know German scholars, Muslim Christian scholars, they are discussing that, and they say they had to ask beforehand. Yes, just really important, because now we are living in a world in which, if we really claim to be, as believers, inclusive, of course, we should be also. And, the languages are important for the religions, the language which makes this connection between the creator and the created. The whole sacred scriptures, are made by words. So, they are important. They can just, offend people. That's a very good observation. Concerning the God, in the name of God and his mercy, here I will say, the idea is this. These two people, these two religious leaders, actually wanted to offer a method that could be also applied to other religions. Could be, for instance, a document prepared by a Hindu scholar, Hindu leader, and the Jainist leader. they could also start by their own religious conviction, saying that we have this conviction, we see this world, the whole universe like that, departing from our spirituality, but we are arriving at a point with which we can also embrace the whole humanity. Here, these both religious leaders underline their beliefs, underline that they believe in God, which is defined in the Abrahamic terms. There's a whole narrative of patriarch which believed in God, having observed the skies, and they tried to relate himself to sun, then moon, etc. Then just arriving to a monotheistic idea of God. And then they say, okay, we are, rooted in our faith. This is a faith in one God, unique God. But this idea of believing in one God, in this Abrahamic God, does not prevent us to embrace the religious. Maybe if you remember in the document, they defined the gender, maybe it's sexual, I don't remember, sexual, racial, ethnic, whatever, diversity is a will of God. They accept we are different because this is wanted by God himself. So if you would like to have a more universalist language, yes, of course, maybe that a document should use a language in which it could make references to other transcendental, powers and understandings, energies. I find it very fair. But here, the method is just a little bit different, starting as two believers in particular faiths, but arriving at a point, this particularity, these differences, we believe differently, but our differences will not push us to discriminate other faiths and cultures, more or less like that. Thank you. Gulsum answered your question?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
I think I just wanted to add a little bit on what was said about the Israel-Palestine conflict and the Jewish community's engagement with it and all of that. So, I mean, I've been really trying to keep abreast of everything that's happening in Palestine. And I found something very interesting, especially around the time in, I think, 2021, when the Sheikh Jarrah protests were happening. Some of the most vocal supporters of that protest were Jewish rabbis and the Jewish community in America. Quite a few of them were very vocally against what is happening in Palestine. I support a single state, and they were also very vocally for a single state. And I think looking at it in terms of religion, you cannot obviously let go of that, but you must also keep in mind that this is also an issue of ethnicity, which is often the case in conflicts like these. So unfortunately, as we have seen around the time of those protests and the wall that they have built, the sort of slogan that these the Zionist regime was trying to propagate was the idea that Arabs should be cleansed, not necessarily Muslims or Christians, but an ethnicity rather than a religion. So looking at it in terms of simply the idea of Jews versus Christians or Jews versus Muslims, Muslims versus Christians, that's kind of painting it in a very sort of single brushstroke, which is really not what is happening. So you kind of have to look at it in all terms and situations. And you must also be very aware of who your allies are. So there's quite a lot of the Jewish community who are actually very vocally for Palestine, which I found after engaging with those communities. So just adding to that.
Thank you, Gulsum.
Thank you, Kulsum. I'd also just want to say a word here, because when I started working for peace, I noticed that the first thing that I realized was that no community is homogeneous. That's something that Dr. Mustafa, you also mentioned. And every community, there are people who tend to think that the other community people are homogeneous. They're not like us.
Definitely, yeah. This is also part of, I think, the whole idea of that you're organizing this lovely course. Just to just inviting people, to learn more about the differences within the religious communities, so that they can just, develop better understanding, mutual understanding, among themselves. Yeah.
Do we have any more questions? Do we have any comments from anyone? Italy, Dominic, anyone? James, Ruben?
Can I just add a very small question, if that's okay? So I was just wondering, this concept of universal brotherhood, and I was just wondering, where is this demand, where is this call for universal brotherhood coming from? Is it a realization of how divided we are, or is it some higher, some transcendental stuff? I'm not something that is beyond us. Is it, or is it? Really that question, if that makes sense.
Thank you, James, for your question. This is, of course, a big topic now. People are trying to research on it, and in the upcoming months, I will be participating in other meetings in different contexts, in different languages, one in Austria and German, etc. And this is a part of the research project, actually, part of the research projects. But very briefly, of course, the religions have already, that's why they could just, now process this again. The religions or cultures around the world, they have already, important baggage about that. It's not just something coming out of blue, just, okay, we are now in the 20th century, so many wars happened, and then from this century passing to the 21st century, we should not that simply. But the thing is, unfortunately, for some reasons that just we try to, cover a little bit, political, social, whatsoever, just people are so divided, so they want to maybe raise too much, highlight these aspects of religions. But I will say here that I mentioned briefly, as you see, also the very secular ideas, the republicanism and then socialism, etc. They also appeal to this idea, just trying to find out that the human beings are really part of a human family. Okay, we have also, I try to a little bit not blame, but just to relativize the biological bond. Of course, that's also important. It helps us to understand that we are actually related. But this idea of discovering the human fraternity, the sisterhood, brotherhood, of course, it's a little bit related to the change in our, I would say, especially for the starting with 19th century, but coming today, with our sociological contexts, because the sociology itself, established as a discipline in 19th century. It's not a coincidence, because it observed the founding fathers of sociology, Weber, Durkheim, etc. They observed this transformation in the society from mechanical societies to organic societies. As people were living together, maybe in tribes, in families, traveling were not that much, common for everyone else, and they were seeing people around them, and very similar to them as ethnicity, as language, etc. With 19th century, there with industrial revolution, etc., there are different types of belongingness emerged. And this idea of just to belong to a community which is not part of your ethnic or religious whatever group, that the whole idea of urbanization, people leaving their villages, the rural areas, and they got this shock actually. How could they identify themselves with the new urban areas? And then we raised at different levels, could be philosophical or social, public policy levels. We raised the idea of how can we really create new types of social cohesion? How can we really relate ourselves in a society in which people have different religions, different ethnicities, different languages, different social classes? It's not anymore that everyone else going in the morning, working in the same field, then coming back home, making the same bread, eating the same food, more or less praying the same, divinities. Now we have all these diversities around, and the question is again, 19th century, it creates conflicts. I mean, world wars are not totally independent from this. It's just we tend to explain them with economic interests, etc. It's fine and fair, but if we only explain these problems, the conflicts, wars, only with economic aspects, it will be kind of misleading. So how can we actually respond to this radical sociological changes in our lives? And I think we are looking for, as humanity at different levels, looking for new bonds that we could just, make ourselves again, in a way, at home. Maybe, recently, one of the main problems in the Western world, and in some countries they establish ministries for that, is the loneliness. There are human beings living in city centers. They are suffering from loneliness, and they feel lonely. They have health problems. They cost much more to the state. They tend to commit more suicide, etc. So this idea of losing of your idea of belongingness to a particular community actually is a huge, again, social problem. I think that's why, that was a former question related to that. I think again answer to the other colleague, and I think there is also a concrete necessity to create these bonds in our societies.
Thank you. Osama, you can go again. Mohammed Osama, are you there? Can you hear us?
Yes, sir. I just want to thank you, all of you, and for
Please
your
fix your
work.
camera again.
For your work, because now I'm realizing slowly that how good a society can be made if peoples like you are working to eliminate the differences and create a good environment. That's all we need this very widely everywhere. It's not only in it's everywhere, from India to Europe to Arab to everywhere. We need someone to step up and is trying to create try to sort out the problem with dialogue. And I'm very, very thankful to all those people associated with this organization.
Thank you. Does anyone have any comments and questions? Yes. Sorry, Dr. Mustafa, go ahead.
No. I just wanted to say thank you to Osama for his participation. That's all. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Yes. Noor, Tra, Haver, anybody else would like to have a comment or question? Okay. Since there are no more questions, just a couple of things. We have had Dr. Mustafa in the past as well, and the recordings are there available on our YouTube channel at the rate Dialogue for Peace. The last year, he spoke on preventing extremism through interreligious dialogue, a European perspective, and that's in the archives of our video channel as well, YouTube channel. So please have a look when you get a time. And we have an admin announcement. We have increased the time for required for reflections. And last week, most of you gave quite good reflections. Thank you for that. I hope you will keep it up. So I will send you the reflection forms after this session, and you can submit it by Saturday, after Saturday, 6 o'clock. Yes. Thank you, Dr. Mustafa.
I thank you for all of you for your participation, and I wish you all the best for your studies, for your professional life, and please bear on your mind, if you happen to be here in Eternal Study in Rome, please drop a line. I would love to see you and just, grab a coffee with you. Thank you.